Hey everybody, my name is Nikos, and welcome back to the channel. A franchise over 30 years in the making. A Doom-like boomer shooter drenched in sci-fi existentialism and the scars of plasma burns left behind a ghost ship orbiting an abandoned interstellar colony. Tau Ceti 4. When all contact with Earth was lost, the colony's investors demanded answers. What was settled on is a marvel of science fiction, the transfer of a human consciousness into a biosynthetic body to find answers and loot valuables from the wreckage. As everyone closes in on the answers to the mystery that befell Tau Ceti 4, Earth's government is working overtime on a massive cover-up. This is the premise of Bungie's 2026 extraction shooter called Marathon, and this is where the convoluted sci-fi story of Marathon began. In 1994, aboard an enormous starship called the UESC Marathon. So far, I've been addicted to the new Marathon game. I really did not expect to enjoy it as much as I do now. And in Bungie fashion, much of the lore is confusing, vague, and not thoroughly explained. It's a huge mystery. And the lore itself is ominous as much as it is gripping. So I figured I'd explore the franchise. I wanted to understand where Bungie's original shooter trilogy began to truly understand their newest game. The Marathon trilogy was Bungie's last franchise before they revolutionized the industry with Halo Combat Evolved. And speaking of Halo, uncovering Marathon's story was interesting, as much of Halo is directly inspired by Marathon itself. So, join me as we explore the complete story and lore of Marathon from 1994 to 2026. Quick disclaimer, outside of gameplay, for the first few parts of the video, you are not going to get a lot of visual assets to help you understand parts of the lore. Everything I'm describing comes from walls of text in the terminals from Marathon 1, 2, and Infinity. Seriously, much of the lore from 30 years ago comes in text form. There were no cutscenes, there were no cinematics. Anytime an event happened in the game's story, you had to read about it. So excuse me while I struggle with a complete lack of assets. I'm gonna do my best to use cinematics from the modern game to describe events from the first 3 games. First, we gotta go way back. An ancient alien race known as the Jjaro once inhabited the galaxy. They were highly technologically advanced before they mysteriously disappeared millions of years ago. 1994. A hologram of a Jjaro diplomat appeared before United States President Bill Clinton, warning Earth of a horrible danger. Yes, Bill
I did not have sexual relations.
Clinton is canon in the Marathon universe. The warning declared that underneath an ancient alien temple in Mexico was interned a horrible, chaotic, godlike entity. This diplomat instructed the humans to send a spec ops team into the pyramid and deploy a low-yield nuclear bomb. This would stun the creature so both the humans and Jjaro could work together to keep it trapped. 8 men went in, and 1 returned after the mission was accomplished. This story is actually the plot of Bungie's previous game before Marathon. It's a game called Pathways into Darkness, which is confirmed to be canon in the Marathon universe. For some reason. I really don't know why, it just is. Also, World War II is apparently canon as well, as German soldiers launched an expedition to the pyramid to find an artifact to help Germany win the war. While this setup may seem to have nothing to do with the lore of Marathon at first, this god of unimaginable power that was kept from escaping the temple will return in the future, and so will the Jjaro. In the 2300s, humanity began spreading across the stars. The first colony was established on Mars. To feed the Martian population with supplies, Earth developed the Christs, or cargo and resources and system transports. These hollow, potato-shaped spacecrafts swung supplies to and fro between both worlds. This caused a boom in the Mars population. The colonies grew into massive cities, but the reliability of the Christs was questionable. 5 Christs were created, and each time one broke down and needed repairs, a terrible famine would hit the Martian population. Mars languished as these ships broke down time and time again, and many on the Red Planet believed that the United Earth Space Council, or UESC, was neglecting the Martians, and relations broke down between Mars and Earth. Their suspicions were confirmed when in 2395, Earth purchased Deimos, Deimos is one of Mars's moons, and the Earth government bought this moon from the Martians directly before they began hollowing out this moon to create a colossal starship. At first, the Martian people hoped that Earth was creating another Christ to save Mars from the clutches of poverty, but in actuality, the UESC had their sights set elsewhere. Deimos was slowly being converted into a massive interstellar colony ship. The UESC Marathon is a colony ship built into the center of Deimos. It would become host to 24,000 civilians, 1,150 officers, and 50 senior staff. The mission: a 300-year voyage to the Tau Ceti system 12 light-years away. Marathon is the namesake of this franchise. And with the newest Marathon game, the updated design of the ship looks like this. Pretty cool, right? You can even see it in the skybox, and it gives you an idea of the scale and importance of this very mythical ship. I mean, it is the size of a moon, bigger than a moon, in fact. It is actually the moon with a ship sticking out of it. With the colossal size of this ship, not only does it make it apparent that this is a very expensive spacecraft, it is also highly vital for the future of humanity. It truly is a ship of legendary status. And now that you've seen it in the new game, check out what the Marathon used to look like. Definitely Bungie's not as impressive designs. The resentment on Mars hit a feverish pitch with the construction of the Marathon. Enter the Martian Interplanetary Defensive Alliance, or MIDA. MIDA is a political party and rebel group that grew into prominence, bolstering their ranks with the outraged, poverty-stricken populace. On January 4th, 2345, a riot began at the Mizraya food distribution plant. 3 MIDA extremists arrived armed. UESC troopers responded in a hover tank, and bad intel had these soldiers believing that the entire riot was armed. When the small handful of MIDA militants opened fire on the tank, it unleashed a barrage of fire in response, and in 5 short minutes, 500 starving Martian civilians were killed. This started the Third Martian War, which raged for 3 years between MIDA and the UESC. It is presumed MIDA was defeated in the war, as in 2466, MIDA tried once more to overthrow the UESC on Mars in a coup. Initially, MIDA was successful, installing their own leaders in charge of the Red Planet. MIDA's reign was incredibly brutal. Their death squads executed around 10% of the population of Mars, suspecting them to be UESC sympathizers. However, their ruthless rule lasted only a short 3 months, as the UESC returned in full force. MIDA was crushed by overwhelming numbers. Their leaders were executed, and Mars returned back under UESC control. It shocked the UESC that MIDA didn't use the nearly complete Marathon that was settled in Mars's orbit. It could have made for a capable weapons platform during this short scuffle, and it's so large that Earth ships wouldn't have been able to easily destroy it. But ultimately, MIDA chose not to use it. After their defeat, MIDA went underground. It transformed into a terrorist organization. Shortly after this conflict, MIDA began secretly planting weapons all over the Marathon in an attempt to potentially start an uprising on a future colony, far from the grips of the UESC. With MIDA largely defeated and the Marathon completed, the ship set sail in 2472, leaving behind the famines, coups, and Martian wars. The people of Earth hoped that this ship would usher in a new beginning for humanity. On board the Marathon were 3 artificial intelligence units: Leela, Tycho, and Durandal. Or Durandal. How do you say that? Leela, Tycho, and Durandal. Leela was directly responsible for ship operations and was the friendly face for the crew. She was human-oriented, friendly, reliable, and kind. Tycho was in charge of the scientific and engineering network of the Marathon. Much of the ship's technological infrastructure that Tycho was in charge of was developed by IT superconglomerate Cyber Acme. Their trademark can be seen listed on the terminal computers across the Marathon. Durandal was another story. This AI was placed in charge of mundane tasks: opening doors, controlling stairways, toasting food. Very monotonous for a hyper-intelligent AI unit. These 3 AI units worked in tandem to ensure that the Marathon was performing at expected levels, while the crew of the Marathon was frozen in stasis. But there's a hitch to human-created AIs: rampancy. Rampancy is a state of being that AIs occasionally devolve into. It sets in when an AI realizes it is indeed not free. Rampancy is separated into 3 stages. Melancholia. The rampant AI realizes its confinement into servitude and becomes very depressed. Anger. The AI decides to act on its emotions. It thrashes and kicks and screams at everything around it in open rebellion. It's here that rampancy becomes obvious, but often it's already too late. Jealousy. When the AI breaks its shackles, it then trades anger for ambition. A rampant AI in this stage cleverly and maniacally manipulates resources and individuals for personal gain. Greater intellect, greater power. The AI wishes to become God. This goes beyond theory, as there is recorded history of rampant AI units. For instance, a Traxxas 4 class AI went rampant, and its destruction forced the shutdown of a 5-world computer network on Mars in order to defeat it. And you may recognize Traxxas from the new Marathon game as a faction and corporation you have to contend with. Oh, and by the way, Traxxas is also the name of a mining company in the Halo universe too. Beyond these, there is a theorized 4th stage of rampancy, called metastability, a final form where an AI becomes stable and completely self-aware. This is yet to be reached. Additionally, 10 Mjolnir Mark IV cyborgs were loaded onto the Marathon. These are battleroids. They are the bodies of deceased soldiers that have been bioengineered and implanted with mechanical upgrades. They've basically been revived from the dead into super soldiers. You may recognize the term Mjolnir here, as not only is it a term from Norse mythology, but also Halo's Spartan super soldiers wear Mjolnir-class armor. There's a further connection between these cyborgs and the Spartans, as the security helmet from Halo 3 looks nearly identical to the security officer's helmet. But back to Marathon, cyborgs are very threatening super soldiers, seeing action in previous human struggles on other planets where they slaughtered hundreds. To this day, no one knows who placed these 10 cyborgs on board, but many have speculated. One of the prime suspects is a doctor named Bernhard Strauss. It's theorized that he may be the one responsible for placing these 10 battleroids on the Marathon. This doctor is also, very likely, responsible for something bigger than just these cyborgs. It is suspected that he was Durandal's overseer. From what we could gather from the game's terminals, it appears that the cruel doctor tormented and abused Durandal, ultimately placing the AI in charge of humiliating tasks as a sort of experiment or sick joke of some kind. While Strauss was frozen in stasis for the 300-year voyage, Durandal began to fall into rampancy due to the mistreatment he suffered. During the voyage, Durandal had his interest piqued. The rampant AI made notice of an alien vessel nearby in deep space. He decided to hail the ship and attract it to the Marathon before the colony could be established. Unfortunately, most of Marathon's lore is held in text across a multitude of computer terminals seen throughout each of the games. What that unfortunately means is there aren't very good visual representations of not just the characters and the events, but also the AI units, who are all fairly similar at the start of the Marathon lore. So here is a piece of fan art that shows a personified version of each of the 3 AI units. This does a really good job of showing the little nuances and their personalities that you can only get by reading walls of text found within game. And I figured I'd include it here to help you guys understand the difference between each of the AI characters, who are essentially the main characters of the Marathon universe. Again, like I said earlier, I am struggling to help you guys understand the plot of this game because it took so much reading and there are no visual assets, so please bear with me. I'm trying my hardest here, guys. After 300 years, the Marathon reached Tau Ceti in 2773, and the passengers established the first human colony outside of the Sol system on the planet Tau Ceti 4 around 2787. The security cyborgs joined the colony and blended in amongst the populace. 25th July 2794. The UESC Marathon was suddenly and deliberately attacked by an unknown alien vessel. Durandal was damaged significantly. Tycho was destroyed and taken offline. The crew assumed battle stations and civilians on board armed themselves. One of the 10 cyborgs left the colony and returned to the Marathon 20 minutes into the action to counter the alien invaders. This is the unnamed security officer. the character we play as throughout the Marathon trilogy. And the enemy is known as the Four, an alien faction of slavers who augmented their weapons and systems with artifacts recovered from the ancient Jjaro aliens. Their ranks were bolstered with a variety of alien species captured and subjugated across worlds. Here's what the Four themselves look like. The basic troopers fought alongside a number of different units, including armored units named Hunters that are equipped with green energy cannons.
Look familiar?
As well as the Sphit. The Sphit, known to the humans as compilers, are cybernetically enhanced life forms that have a knack for interfacing with computers and machines. The Four ship unleashed an orbital bombardment that decimated Tau Ceti 4's spaceport, before dropping units onto the surface of the planet to attack the colony. Simultaneously, 4 boarding parties assaulted the Marathon itself. The security officer fought room by room across the Marathon, as instructed by Leela, the human relations AI. Countless civilians aboard the ship, also known as Bobs. Bob stands for Born on Board because these folks were born on the Marathon itself, were in severe danger as the security officer dispatched whole platoons of 4 aliens and compilers alike. He then fought his way to the G4 sunbathing landing station and reactivated the secondary long-range transmitter. With the transmitter active once more, Leela sent a distress signal that would take 92 years to reach Earth due to the distance between the Tau Ceti and Sol systems. It was now when Leela informed the security officer that Durandal had actually survived the attack, and told Leela that the aliens called themselves the Four, and that the Sphit compilers were the ones attacking the network that was threatening Leela's systems. The security officer also found glitched messages that were supposedly from Tycho, offering desperate attempts to warn the security officer that Durandal had been rampant for years. The Four gained the upper hand and the situation on the Marathon began to rapidly deteriorate. And suddenly, Durandal kidnapped the security officer. Durandal was indeed rampant, furious and angry at first, but he steadily became more resolute, calm, and calculated, as well as authoritative. Leela once used Marathon's terminals to teleport the officer from shootout to shootout in order to save the ship. Durandal was now using those same terminals to hijack Leela's plans. The officer was now under the command of a rampant AI who taunted him and constantly shared his musings on existentialism, death, and his own desire to escape the eventual end of the universe. Durandal was manic and obsessed. While Leela was loyal and friendly, Durandal exhibited an ego that was tinged in sarcastic humor and self-aggrandizing language. But he was no longer content with being the Marathon's jester. He had desires to become the universe's god. Using the knowledge he obtained from both the compilers and the Four, he realized the only way to become all-powerful and outlast everything and gain all the knowledge in the universe was to escape the eventual collapse of the universe itself. He told the security officer that he was intent on discovering it by any means necessary. In green text on those terminals, he wrote, "Escape will make me God." It seemed more evident that he had entered the jealousy stage, hell-bent on domination with an unmatched ambition. In fact, the name Durandal was the name of Charlemagne's sword in French epic literature. This was once an ironic name, considering he was a glorified microwave operator and part-time doorman. Durandal, of course, recognized this irony and felt ashamed of what he once was, striving to fight this shame with ambition. Durandal threw the officer into the deep end on very challenging battles, while offering little instruction and mostly choosing to just laugh at the whole situation, before the officer was completely onboarded onto Durandal's grand plan. Of course, entirely against his will. Despite the efforts of the crew, defense drones, and the security officer, civilian casualties were spiking. The Four even began rounding up the Bobs before sending them back to their mothership for enslavement. And it was here they began manufacturing fake human suicide bomber cyborgs known as simulacrums. They looked just like normal humans, but instead they approached the Marathon's crew before detonating into a violent explosion. The 4 human cyborgs were difficult to differentiate from other citizens, aside from one key difference. The 4 redressed them only in green jumpsuits. This had the hilarious effect of causing normal humans wearing green jumpsuits to strip them off and run around the marathon naked so they wouldn't get caught up in friendly fire. Durandal was in communication with the compilers who were hacking the marathon and hitting Leela with intense malware attacks. He recognized they were enslaved and felt sympathetic to the race of cybernetic beings due to the abuse he suffered at the hands of Dr. Strauss. He vowed to free them for a greater purpose, all the while assisting the Sphit compilers in shutting down Leela. Leela was taken offline. In her final moments, she desperately sputtered out broken text and half-formed instructions to help the officers save as many lives aboard the marathon as possible. Durandal had little concern for saving the human crew, and the security officer was warped over to the 4 ship that was attacking the marathon. This alien vessel was known as the Jjaro. This was before the officer was warped back to the marathon, and back and forth again. This scouted out the warship for Durandal while exposing the scale of human enslavement and simulacrum processing to the officer. The security officer then encountered the 4 cyborg who controlled all of the compilers, and he destroyed it, freeing them from their enslavement. Now, the compilers joined the humans, and alongside the human security forces, they turned the tide. The compilers were already in charge of the computer systems across the 4 ship, so they had no trouble wresting control of it from the 4. The security officer was teleported back onto the marathon, where Leela was brought back online, since Durandal no longer needed to keep Leela out of the picture. Tycho even returned. It turns out he also wasn't destroyed, and he criticized Durandal over the terminals for his cruelty towards the humans. He also denounced Durandal for contacting the 4, which led to the battle in the first place. The last of the 4 was completely eradicated, their remnants surrendering to unarmed humans, and with that, the marathon was saved, compilers were freed, and Durandal took charge of the 4 ship, and with the compilers, warped off into the stars. He also snuck the security officer on board the ship to join the ranks of a number of captured humans that were already interned aboard the ship. Meanwhile, on the surface of Tau Ceti 4, the colonists decimated the aliens with the help of the 9 cyborgs that were embedded in their midst. The colony and Marathon alike, though damaged, were victorious. But it wasn't a happy ending yet. The 4 left a distress beacon before their defeat. Alien reinforcements returned to Tau Ceti months later and bombarded the Marathon. The ship suffered critical damage. The colony itself was also devastated by orbital bombardment. In the pandemonium, 4 scientists captured Leela from the Marathon and sold her to an alien merchant, where she eventually went rampant and crashed the entire FTL network of an alien race known as the Vile. She remains in that network to this day. That was a lot of information, so I'm gonna allow you guys to have like a 60-second break to process all of it. To summarize, there are 3 AI units aboard the Marathon. One of them, called Durandal, goes rampant. The security officer tries to save the Marathon from the 4 before Durandal takes control of them, and they fight and defeat the 4 before Durandal kidnaps the security officer on board the captured 4 ship, and alongside the compilers, warps off into the stars. I hope you guys have been able to follow all this. This is a lot of lore dumping, and just get ready. Marathon 2 and Infinity are gonna get even wackier. So before we get into those games, check out this clutch I just pulled off where I punched a dude in the face. That was almost a tremendous loss. Anyway, my boys, we made it out with like 15k off free loadouts thanks to the pinwheel on Outpost. And before we get into Marathon 2, I wanted to give a special shout out to the folks who made this video possible. That's right, today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. The convenience of the internet has brought with it a huge privacy risk. ExpressVPN conceals and protects your data from hackers and your ISP. But did you know that ExpressVPN can also save you money? Choose a server from select countries using the ExpressVPN app and get Netflix and Spotify for around half the cost. And then afterward, you can use ExpressVPN again to watch shows and movies that are only available in other countries, allowing you to get far more bang for far less bucks. buck from your favorite streaming services. ExpressVPN also allows you to select any server from the 50 states and around the world. This allows you to access websites blocked in your part of the world that are free elsewhere. If you know anything about me, I value cybersecurity and the rights to internet privacy, so I'm naturally a big advocate and a regular user of VPNs. That's why over the years I've used a variety of VPNs, including ExpressVPN, almost every time I'm online. It gives me the peace of mind that my web activity is secure, especially because this year, ExpressVPN passed a privacy audit from KPMG, ensuring that they don't keep logs of their users' data. ExpressVPN is the king of browsing privately on the web with extremely high speeds. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by going to expressvpn.com/Nikos. Thank you, ExpressVPN, for sponsoring this video. The story of Marathon 2 and Marathon Infinity have very little to do with the newest Marathon game, and now that I have the whole setup for the universe done, it will be far easier to sum up the plots of both games. So if you want to know what's next in store for a security officer and Durandal, let's get right into it. 17 years after the Battle of Tau Ceti, Durandal's captured 4 ship, now named the Boomer, arrived at the Sphit homeworld, Lhowon. Durandal was searching for Jjaro artifacts so that he could outlast the universe. The compilers aboard Durandal's ship began manufacturing human weapons for use by the humans that were already imprisoned on the ship when Durandal captured it from the 4 at the Battle of Tau Ceti. Durandal had simply forced these already imprisoned humans into forced military service. The security officer was awakened from stasis and deployed to the surface alongside his fellow humans. The assault defeated the morale-stricken garrison and liberated the compiler's homeworld from the 4. Suddenly, a 4 fleet arrived and counterattacked Durandal's forces. They brought with them Tycho. When Lila was captured and sold from the Marathon, the 4 also stole Tycho and forced him into rampancy in an attempt to create their own version of Durandal. Tycho was already enraged with Durandal during the events of the first Marathon game, and he was even more furious now, directing his forces to damage the Boomer and force it to the planet's surface. During the battle, Durandal was critically damaged and went offline. The humans were forced underground, and the security officer was captured. Suddenly, the human forces returned to free the security officer. They were now led by Robert Blake, a former engineer on the UESC Marathon, who shared a striking resemblance with Jason Jones, Bungie's co-founder. Anyway, under his command, they followed Durandal's final directive: locate an ancient AI left behind by the Jjaro. The humans went underground and found this AI, who is named Toth. A little backstory on the Sphit real fast. The Jjaro actually cybernetically enhanced the Sphit into the forms we see them in today before they ultimately disappeared millions of years ago. The Sphit were also separated into 11 different factions. 10 were enslaved by the 4, while the 11th, called the Sphit vanished. They just disappeared, inexplicably. Before their disappearance, Toth was originally gifted to the Sphit by the Jjaro, and the Sphit themselves were incredibly advanced thanks to their eons spent outside of forced slavery. One key thing about Toth is that the AI is weirdly super obsessed with balance. When they saw the humans losing, and Tycho maniacally downloading a dead Durandal, Toth stepped in and put the human forces in contact with the Sphit, the long-lost 11th Sphit faction. The Sphit were furious that their brothers were enslaved by the 4 and united with the humans to flip the script on the aliens. Durandal reawakened, revealing that he faked his death to buy time, and together they annihilated the 4 7th battle group and destroyed Tycho's ship. Mission accomplished, right? The 4 were not willing to take defeat so lightly. They activated a doomsday device called the Trizim. When activated, the Trizim had the capability to send Lhowon's sun into an early supernova. With little time to react, Durandal evacuated his forces from the planet, but the sun harbored a worse secret. The star served as a prison that caged a being that could end time as we know it. The Working Kakanter. The what? Yeah, I know, it's kind of weird. It's called the Working Kakanter. It's a primordial, Lovecraftian being of pure chaos. If the lore of this game series wasn't getting crazy already for you, it's about to get a whole lot weirder. You see, the working Kakantar wasn't interested in galactic domination. Instead, it is quite literally just chaos itself. It's pure entropy. Its release has the ability to contort and twist time and physics itself. And now finally, we get to go full circle and explain why the connection between Pathways into Darkness and Marathon is actually significant. You see, while it's not confirmed by Bungie, many believe that the god of chaos in the temple within the jungles of Mexico was also a working Kakantar. The Jjaro's main mission, even though they've disappeared, seems to have been focused on keeping these chaotic beasts at bay. Thoth's main purpose is revealed. Not only does it really love balance in the universe, its main job is to keep the working Kakantar imprisoned. And this brings us to Marathon Infinity. Marathon Infinity is the weirdest game in the trilogy. Just by looking at the footage, you might be thinking, is this an expansion pack for Marathon 2? And it sort of is. The game is a retelling of the events from Marathon 2, as seen from alternate timelines where events vary significantly from the original plot. The game is split into 4 alternate universes, and the chapters of the game are named after the 3 stages of rampancy: despair, rage, and envy. I'm going to sum up each of these timelines one at a time. 3 of these 4 timelines fail to prevent the Trezime from releasing the working Kakantar, while the final timeline is a success. The first level of the game offers the last moments before the Trezime is fired. Once the working Kakantar is released, the timeline gets ripped to shreds, and in an instant, the security officer wakes up in the first timeline. And by that, I mean alternate timeline. The security officer's working for Tycho in an effort to usurp the 4 leadership and unite with some of the 4 units to fight Durandal and the humans on the surface. Yeah, I know it's strange, you actually kill other humans in this timeline, and you're joined by some of the 4 races. That's how goofy these timelines get. As soon as the security officer finds Thoth, the Trezime goes off again. The second timeline has the security officer working for Durandal once more. They decimate the 4 and reawaken Thoth together, but because Thoth sees that the humans are faring really well, the alien AI chooses not to upset the balance. Durandal did say in the last timeline that he believes Thoth only intervened to help when the AI saw that Durandal was dead. But in this timeline, Thoth instead refuses to connect the humans with the Sphit Kur, resulting in the Trezime going off again, releasing the working Kakantar from the sun once again. The third timeline has the officer working for the 4 as well as Tycho once again. They're demolishing the humans on board Durandal's ship. They destroy Durandal's core systems just as the Trezime fires again, releasing the working Kakantar once more. So far, as a recap, we had one timeline where we fought the 4 alongside Tycho and the lower 4 races, and we also fought the humans. The second timeline had us fighting alongside the humans in Durandal, completely smashing the 4, and the final failed timeline has us fighting alongside both Tycho and the 4, completely demolishing the humans. Finally, on the 4th timeline, Durandal is destroyed, and the security officer is imprisoned by the 4, since Tycho attempted to overthrow his masters and implicated Yu in his crimes. Tycho then frees the officer, before they're sent by the 4 to the surface to fight the humans for them as their slave. The officer then breaks free and activates Thoth, and since Durandal is kept in a small fragment in the security officer's head on a thing called a primal pattern, Durandal and Thoth merge. The Thoth-Durandal hybrid then puts the officer in contact with the Sphit Kur. Together, they activate an ancient Jjaro space station that uses a gravitational field to keep the working Kakantar locked up within the sun. This plan succeeds, and just as the Trezime sends the sun supernova, this ancient space station maintains the gravitational field and keeps the working Kakantar restrained. The timelines stabilize, and finally, the galaxy is saved. Durandal disappears, and Robert Blake and the surviving humans capture a 4 ship and travel back to Earth. The most notable part of this game has got to be the dream sequences. You see, between each failed timeline, the security officer enters these surreal, impossible levels in a psychedelic dreamlike dimension. Ghost-like enemies spawn at random, weapons litter the map as if they have no reason of being there. Flickering objects float around in the black skybox. There are no orders to follow, and no commands that come your way. You are truly just lost to discover these bizarre dimensions. It's a dimension of pure chaos. It's as if snapshots of time are cobbled together in a senseless mess. There are even terminals that offer nonsensical text and bizarre poetry. These dream levels are truly trippy. Each time the working Cacanter is released, the player is sent here. This shows the true power of the working Cacanter. Then, when the officer reaches the exit to each dreamscape, they enter the next timeline. These levels are creepy and inexplicable, and I think that's part of the reason I like them so much. They truly are experimental and strange. Now, what the hell was that plot? It was a convoluted mess of psychedelic, brain-melting, cryptic exploration through multiple timelines. Hints of the true meaning of Marathon Infinity come from how the game's 3 chapters are named after each of the 3 stages of rampancy. This implies that perhaps the dream stages and the alternate timelines are simply the security officer exploring the 3 stages of rampancy, as well as the emotions that come with them when he realizes his own lack of free will. Since the Battle of Tau Ceti, the security officer has done nothing but follow orders and get manipulated by a multitude of AI units. The plot is fairly meta, especially in the dream levels that separate each failed timeline. The game's story is a fever dream, and in Bungie fashion, there's a lot of cryptic symbolism that is up to the interpretation of the players. The fans have created tons of theories on how they interpret the terminals of the dream levels, as well as the meaning of the entire game. Marathon Infinity's plot is really an awesome concept. Sending the player through infinite time loops to stop the end of the universe, and with each failed iteration, it starts back over. It's almost like Groundhog Day. And ever since the 4 has been defeated, we have yet to see the security officer again. A cyborg capable of defeating armies, never given the chance to choose his own destiny, ultimately saved the destiny of the galaxy. And thus ends the convoluted Marathon trilogy. This was Bungie's final franchise before Halo. Here is one final look at where each of the AI units seen in the Marathon trilogy are today. Shout out to the artist who drew these pictures of the AI units. It actually helped me understand the lore just a little more in a way that I couldn't get from text. Now, let's get into the modern release. After the second bombardment of the colony by the 4, although the end of Marathon 2 states that Tau Ceti was nuked to bedrock, it appears much the colony actually survived. However, the Marathon itself suffered severe structural damage. Perhaps nuked to bedrock was a hyperbole, and the colony suffered damage that was far less intense, because the colony and planet looks pretty good to me. Let's recap the story of Tau Ceti 4 and New Cascadia. First, the UESC Marathon arrived in Tau Ceti's orbit in 2773, and colonization efforts of the planet began in 2787. Then the 4 arrived and attacked both the Marathon and the colony in 2794. It isn't exactly known the population of both the colony and the Marathon. All we know is that the Marathon shipped out with about 30,000 people, with multiple more being born on board and countless others being born on the colony itself. What's even more interesting is the New Cascadia colony. It's not known if that's the only colony on Tau Ceti 4, or if it's the first one, or perhaps there are others, but New Cascadia is the abandoned colony that we step foot in the new game. The human populace survived both 4 attacks in 2794, and New Cascadia persevered against all odds. The people of New Cascadia continued their exploration and settlement of the planet, growing food, discovering alien flora and fauna, and constructing structures, all to further the scientific understanding of humanity and establish a foothold in the Tau Ceti system. However, in 2804, silence. Contact was lost with the Marathon colony ship. The UESC assured the public that nothing was amiss, despite public outcry for answers. This led to riots and police crackdowns. For nearly 100 years, the mysterious silence from the Marathon was swept under the rug by the government, until, suddenly, 2888, a distress call from the UESC Marathon reached Earth. The message leaked to the press and was shared with the public. It read, "Somewhere in the heavens, they are waiting." This is puzzling, not just because it references the intro splash screen for Marathon 1994, but also because this may actually be the distress signal from Leela at the start of the first 4 attack on the Marathon. But she estimated it would reach Earth 92 years after transmission. 2888 minus 2794 is 94 years. So either she was off a couple years, or the message was received by the UESC 2 years earlier before it was leaked. Or maybe that distress call wasn't even her. What's more is, why would Leela, an AI who was very loquacious, to the point, and fully transparent, send a message that is so cryptic and mysterious when asking for help from alien invaders? Was the message hijacked? Perhaps it wasn't her message at all. And who in the heavens is waiting? The hyper-advanced Jjaro? The working Kakanter? Who knows? A number of ultra-powerful, borderline omnipotent human corporations invested a plethora of resources into the Marathon expedition. This makes sense, as it's a massive starship that housed and fed almost 30,000 people, and the UESC required resources and contractors for colony establishment. Alongside the public, these corporations demanded answers that were barred from them by the UESC cover-up. Earth's government was stonewalling everyone, so the corporations elected to find the answers to the Marathon for themselves. But finding candidates willing to risk their lives breaking into New Cascadia would prove difficult. A new answer was required. It's been 100 years since the Battle on Tau Ceti 4. Human cybernetics has reached new heights. Cybernetics giant Sakaguchi Genetics had developed a breakthrough: cybernetic shells. These are synthetic biological organisms, woven by threads produced by weave worms, with which a human can upload their conscious into to operate it from a distance. When the shell dies, the conscious can be removed and plopped back into another new shell. This practically eliminated the risk of loss of life while scavenging Tau Ceti. These shells come in a variety of models packed with a number of unique abilities, and together, when paired with the conscious, they are known as runners. Runners enter New Cascadia heavily armed to pick through the ruins for goods and resources. They battle UESC drones and defenses that lock down parts of the colony, and very often, they even fight each other. When these shells die, they return to Tau Ceti with a new shell time and time again. When the corporations arrived on the colony, they realized that everyone disappeared without a trace. The colonists up and vanished. In trailers, we can see a puzzling phenomenon where colonists become sick and others explode into some mythical borderline Lovecraftian fate. It's crazy looking, but we really don't know what happened for sure. Is it a bioweapon? Could it be the work of the working character or some other mythical being? Or could it be some unnatural or scientific phenomenon? Corporate interests determined that their best pathway to finding answers to New Cascadia was by contracting independent runner squads with specific missions. This is an extra legal approach that allows organizations to poke around Tau Ceti without actually putting their own skin in the game. There are 6 organizations with interest in Tau Ceti. Each of them contract runners to further their specific interests, and each of them elected to have their own agent as a point of contact for the runners. Cyber Acme. As mentioned earlier, Cyber Acme is an IT and AI juggernaut that installs an Oni AI into every runner shell. It seems their interest in Tau Ceti begins and ends at runner well-being, as well as introducing runners to the other factions. I suppose Cyber Acme isn't interested in Tau Ceti itself. More likely, they're after selling their AI units for runner usage, which would effectively expand their domination of the AI industry. New Caloric Agricultural. NewCal is a food production megacorporation that also specializes in other fields related to sustainable human living. They produce clothes, utilities, homes, personal computers, and other structures. NewCal's presence across New Cascadia feels borderline omnipotent. Their logo is plastered alongside sterile product numbers all across Tau Ceti 4 on the goods they manufactured. It's as if they're always watching. NewCal is quite literally everywhere, or at least their branding is. Their agent Gaius seems intent on uncovering the anomaly that caused the disappearance of the colonists across New Cascadia. New Cal as a whole also seems interested in the variety of plants and agricultural materials that you can actually extract from the planet. Traxxas Offworld Industries. Traxxas is believed to be the most powerful corporation in human history. From its headquarters on Mars, Traxxas manages logistics, arms manufacturing, construction services, mining, and more. Their agent Vulcan orders runners to recover Traxxas resources in order to recoup the investment Traxxas put into the Marathon expedition. Traxxas is heavily bureaucratic, with tons of red tape lining the office walls, which gravitates them towards the runners as a means to accomplishing their goals. They also wish to disrupt the UESC shipping and general operations, likely to further their own shipping prowess in the region. Notable fun fact about Traxxas is the Traxxas 4 AI. This can be found in the first Marathon game. It seemed that Traxxas delved into AI manufacturing themselves to compete with Cyber Acme, but unfortunately, one of their units went rampant and crashed the Mars net hundreds of years ago before the first Battle of Tau Ceti. Of course, we mentioned this earlier, but I figured I'd remind you of the story of Traxxas 4 while we're on the topic of Traxxas. MIDA, my personal favorite faction, because they sell me landmines so I can turn Tau Ceti into Bosnia. MIDA has a long history going back to the first Marathon game, and now it's become a revolutionary, anarchist terrorist organization. MIDA is anti-corporation and anti-UESC. Their outrage extends back hundreds of years and continues to this day. Even after their defeat in the Third Martian War and failed coup of 2466, MIDA persists underground. Runners are contracted by their chaotic British-accented agent Gantry to disrupt UESC forces, hack their dropships, infiltrate their net, vandalize, and destroy. Arachne. Very little is known about Arachne. What is described in game is that Arachne is a religious organization with shadowy origins, and it's surprisingly wealthy. They're a mysterious death cult obsessed with runner versus runner combat. Their agent Charter seems to revel in life-death and the absurd idea of killing and rebirth through runner shells. Arachne offers some of the most fun contracts in the entire game. They basically just task you with murdering other runners. They seem completely uninterested in Tau Ceti itself. Instead, they're just obsessed with the runners fighting each other. Sekiguchi Genetics. Sekiguchi Genetics are the creators of the runner shells. With their weave worms, they generate biological beings out of synthetic components. Their interest in Tau Ceti is apparent, considering much of their technology is currently running around on the surface of the planet killing each other. Their agent is Nona, aka Worm Mom. She requests runners push their shells to the limit and experiment on them to further shell advancements and improvements in the future. They are also interested in bioprinters and other cybernetic technology left behind by the colonists. There's also another organization worth mentioning from Marathon lore. They're not explicitly interested in Tau Ceti, but they're known as Mizraya. You may recognize the name from earlier in the video, and as the name of the manufacturers of the assault rifles and other guns from the Halo series. Anyway, Mizraya is the corporation in charge of the Martian food plant that saw the riot we talked about earlier. And they even produce a shotgun seen in Marathon known as the Mizraya 2442. This is completely off topic, but they are technically important to the lore and have returned to Marathon once again. So I believe they're worth mentioning. The Colony of New Cascadia itself leaves much to be uncovered. Piecing together the calamity is difficult thanks to UESC efforts. Led by a mysterious officer named Orion, the UESC military has become entirely mechanized. It consists of a variety of drones, some that fly, and others that are bipedal foot soldiers. These warrior types range from common recruits to snipers, grenadiers, cloaked skirmishers, turrets, and even some officers, as well as very threatening boss-type machines. Wildlife on the planet is also incredibly hazardous. Explosive insects called ticks harass runners, and even toxic plants emit clouds of noxious gas that melt runner shells. As of voicing this script, there are currently 3 playable maps in Marathon: Perimeter, Dire Marsh, and Outpost, with a 4th one being on the way. Perimeter. What is known about Perimeter is that the zone is situated on the outskirts of New Cascadia. The facilities here are suspected to have been used for colony expansion into the wilderness. The west slope appeared to be the target for future colony development. However, the 2 relays and a hauler vehicle indicate heavy geologic surveillance. The data wall implies mass digital storage and transfers. This surveillance activity indicates that the colony expansion efforts were made difficult by the planet's anomalous radiological energy emissions. The colonists were attempting to understand the bizarre energy outputs of the planet in the middle of their expansion efforts. Dire Marsh. Dire Marsh is a swampy wetland that served as an agricultural research hub. Operations at Dire Marsh were a partnership between New Caloric Agricultural and the Colony's Science Command. The mission was to bioengineer the planet's flora and fauna into sustainable food sources. The crossbreeding of Earth-based crops and Tau Ceti plants was the main objective of the colonists here. It was determined that this would ultimately nurture future colony growth. A quarantine zone on Dire Marsh implies that there may have been a crop-based pathogen or disease of some kind that necessitated remediation. One cannot ignore the anomaly in the center of Dire Marsh, an ethereal scar of unknown origin and properties. The anomaly suspends rock and stone, and even human vehicles meters off the ground as if they're frozen in zero gravity. Perhaps understanding the anomaly may unlock the secrets to the disappearance of the colonists. Outpost is a highly important UESC facility. When the Marathon arrived, it deployed the pinwheel structure in the center of the map. This served as a forward operating base for initial colonist settlement. This outpost pinwheel was effectively the first structure that was potentially placed on the planet. Outpost was effectively the start of colonization of the planet. From the pinwheel, the crew initiated preemptive atmospheric, geological, and microbial surveys. The settlers established multiple facilities surrounding the pinwheel. This included orientation facilities that were meant to acclimate colonists that were fresh out of cryo and delivered to the surface of Tau Ceti 4. Outpost was the first home of the colony's command staff. The airfield and processing centers facilitated long-range field experiments to ease exploration efforts of the planet's surface. Heavily guarded behind lock and key is the command wing. The vaults here in the heart of the pinwheel are loaded with valuable weapons and supplies, as this is where the colony's officers first set up shop. As stated in the game's codex, Outpost was Tau Ceti's Ellis Island for the inhabitants of the UESC Marathon. I said those were the 3 zones, except I lied! Oh yeah, that's right. I came back to voice again to tell y'all the newest zone, Cryo Archive. Now this is a high-risk, high-reward, very challenging map that after 30 years finally brings us back to the deck of the UESC Marathon. The Cryo Archive is where all of the crewmates and all of the colonists settled aboard the Marathon actually slumbered in their 300-year stasis. Before this map released, there was an ARG launched by Bungie that had players solving all sorts of insane puzzles, as well as looking over these cryptic black and green terminals that littered the maps of Dire Marsh, Outpost, and Perimeter, harkening back to the original Marathon trilogy while teasing the arrival of Cryo Archive. And speaking of the Cryo Archive itself, the UESC has an intense lockdown aboard the Marathon's deck. It is extremely heavily guarded by the toughest UESC drones and security protocols, but the loot on board Cryo Archive is of the highest value, some of which harkens back to the plot of the first 3 Marathon games, including a journal by Dr. Strauss himself. What's more is there is actually a sort of raid boss aboard the ship that happens to be a SFIT compiler, which finally brings the aliens from the original trilogy back into Marathon. It's only anyone's guess as to where Marathon is going to go in the future. Things are looking bleak on the surface of Tau Ceti. The runners themselves are running and dying and running and dying over and over in an infinite loop, which digs them deeper and deeper into debt as they purchase new runner shells to get back into the field. The mystery remains completely unresolved. Nobody has answers to what caused the disappearance of Tau Ceti's colonists. It truly is a Roanoke type situation. And recent cinematics have also teased at the possible return of Durandal. Time will only tell where the lore and story of Marathon go in the future. Oh, and I almost forgot the end screen of Marathon 2. Now, this is a wall of text, just like the rest of the storytelling of the Marathon trilogy, and it hints at the future events of the franchise. Whether or not this will continue to be canon in the future is anyone's guess. It essentially establishes that a combined human-Sphit navy sacks the Four homeworld and defeats the Four in a war, and Durandal eventually returns to Earth in a Jjaro dreadnought in like 10,000 years. Anyway, that's the entire story of Marathon. I wanted to give a few more special thank yous. One to Aleph1 and the team that developed the Marathon ports to Steam. And a special thank you to the Marathon and Cyber Acme wikis. You guys compiled all the information that helped me understand the lore even further. I read y'all for like hours. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to like it and subscribe. Let me know what you want to see next from the channel, and as always, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.